Hello, my friends, and welcome to the Seeds and Weeds podcast. Are you a gardener, a forager, a farmer, or an herbalist? Maybe you're just a little plant curious. Well, you've come to the right place. This is Seeds and Weeds. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. We've got another fun one for you today. We're going to be talking about the flowers of summer. We're going to be exploring all of the wonderful flowers that are popping up in our gardens right now and the multitude of ways that we can use them. We got a guest visitor joining us briefly to talk about some of their very special garden flower tea. And we're going to be exploring all the different ways that we can use these groovy flowers in the kitchen and in the apothecary. Wonderful ways to use this wonderful part of the plant. But before we dig into that, Heather's here and she's going to tell us what is new at Small House Farm.
Well, the garden has been abundantly growing out there. So every single day, it's a challenge of keeping the weeds down and watering the plants and using the abundance that's coming in. So I know last month we did an excerpt from the Herbs in Every Season, but the long days and big rewards in this season of abundance really describes the moment that we're in right now.
Yeah, it's ironic, because you had read that last month and we are living it. Right now, the days seem very long. There is nonstop activity. The kids are here. We're weeding. There's just so many things happening. Plus all of the fun stuff we want to do outside the garden too, so getting out camping and going down to the river and doing all that kind of stuff. Busy, busy stuff. But it is the season of abundance. It is nonstop harvesting already too. Tons of herbs coming in, tons of kale. Oh my goodness, so much kale. It's the season of abundance, most certainly.
Definitely. And actually, the kale's been fun. And maybe we talked about this last month too, but we've been having a bunch of volunteer kale all over the place, in the cracks of the sidewalks, by the garage door, all over the place. We just keep finding this kale pop up and we just keep letting it grow. So it's kind of fun because we keep harvesting these giant bundles of kale and then having to find ways to use them.
Yeah, it's kind of fun because it helps us, be a little more creative in the kitchen. Because, we are literally eating kale every day, sometimes multiple meals in a day involve kale. So we got to kind of mix it up and you got to do different things with it to keep it exciting, So we could bring out some tried and true recipes, most certainly, but then you just got to experiment and have some fun and do something off the wall to try to use these ingredients. And it's really cool to see all the ways, a kaleidoscope of opportunity out there for just something as simple as kale even, but we're doing that with a lot of our herbs too. Especially our mint family herbs. So we could think about things like obviously the oregano, thyme, lemon balm, those guys, they're coming in hot and heavy too. And there's a lot to be had. There's quite an abundance there. And certainly we can get it out on screens and dry it and save it for later too. But we want to enjoy it right now.
And typically, a lot of times we want to cut some of those plants back before they flower. But this year we're letting some of them flower early because of some photos we're trying to take of seed saving, specifically herb seed saving. But a good example of that is the oregano. And when we were in France at the farmer's market there, they were selling bundles of oregano already in flower. The oregano was flowered and that's how they were selling it.
Yeah, and so I've been trying to replicate that a little bit too. So I've been gathering the oregano in flower and tying them into little bundles. I'm putting it in my, my sauce and that sort of thing. It's a delicious flavor. It's absolutely still useful. But until we had observed that use of the plant, I had always harvested my oregano before it flowered. And once it flowered, I'd let it go to seed and just let it do its thing. But, well, what the heck? We get out there, we can harvest that and enjoy those flowers too. They're beautiful.
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
I just recently wrote a blog post for Mountain Rose Herbs. I do a quarterly little article for their website, and it's always different ways to use herbs or whatever it might be. And this time I got a little bit more creative than I typically do. I'll often do something, a medicinal use or a gardening use. I'm one of the only writers on their website that does herb gardening content. But this time, because of all of this creativity we have in the kitchen, I was really in that zone when I wrote this article. So I did a Thai-inspired curry, and I replaced many of the traditional curry ingredients with herbs coming right out of the garden. So it was kind of a fun way to take an old recipe, a traditional recipe that exists already, but transforming it into something completely different by utilizing the herbs that I have available to me. So that was really fun. It came out really nice. I used the lemon balm, oregano, mint, a little bit of coriander, of course, got in there, and it was delicious. As of right now, as we're recording this, the blog isn't out just yet, but it might very well be by the time this airs. So I'm going to put a link to the Mountain Rose Herbs blog anyways, even if the article's not out yet. Check it out because there's a ton of cool stuff in there, a lot of great content. They have a lot of great writers that are using herbs for lots of good stuff. But the curry turned out really good, and it was just so much fun to, again, be creative and think outside the box for ways to use all of this abundance. There's so much stuff coming in. There's a lot of ways that we can use it right now, or ways that we can use these herbs and then preserve them for later.
Yeah, and I think actually pesto is a good example of, yes, you can use basil in the traditional sense of pesto, or you can use mint and lemon balm or thyme or sage. You use those herbs. We like to put them into ice cube trays or like those silicone muffin tins and freeze them in the freezer, because then I can pop them out of those muffin tins and put them in a bag, and they're perfect little serving sizes to put into my, pastas later, or maybe a stir fry or whatever I need to pop that flavor into. It's a great way to save that, and freezing it is so easy and convenient.
It's so convenient to use it too. It's an easy way to preserve it, but there's just such an easy way to use it. You can just, like I said, just pop one out and boom, you got it. It's a sauce ready to go.
Yeah.
So that's been really nice. And using these different combinations of herbs in these pestos, I do garlic scapes is a nice one. But like I said, mint and lemon balm, you can make some really fun green sauces. And it's just a cool way to, again, preserve that harvest while we can. So even if you have a small garden and you just have a little bit of space and you can only grow a few things, you could still do all sorts of cool stuff with the small amount of herbs that you're growing.
And also around the farm right now, we are, like we keep mentioning, photographing different flowers and seeds and things that are coming into fruition here in the season. We're getting ready for a big trip to the Seed Savers Exchange Conference. That's in August. We're really excited about that.
So excited about that. It's the 50th anniversary of Seed Savers Exchange. So it's their big conference and camp out that they used to do back in the day. They're bringing it back, and they're having a multiple day event out there at the Farm Heritage Farm in Decorah, Iowa. I'm going to be a speaker one of the days, but the lineup of presenters, it's like the who's who of gardening and seeds. It's absolutely fantastic. So of course, we're going to put the link for that in the show notes. Check it out. Make plans if you can in any way. Slice a little time out of your life to come to Iowa to check this thing out. It is fantastic. Now I'm going to backtrack for a quick second. When we were just talking about the pesto, it got me thinking. You just recently did a piece for the Patreon about pesto, didn't you?
Did I?
Yes. Yes, you did. It was really good. It was very informative about utilizing herbs to make pesto.
Oh, yes, I do remember. Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of content that we put on Patreon, and sometimes it just flows right out of us. And if once again you haven't checked out our Patreon, there's some posts that are just for the free members and up, but different levels of the different tiers get access to different cool, unique content. And we honestly put a lot more effort into the Patreon than sometimes we even do into the social media nowadays. So go on there, at least sign up for free. Look at the other tiers. I know that we need to do some shout outs to the tier members that subscribe to the higher levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Heather's making a good point here. We still do social media. We've got the Instagram and the Facebook and that sort of thing. And we're active there, and we've got posts and content and stuff that we'll share. But all the really good stuff, the most interesting behind the scenes things, some of our favorite content does end up on the Patreon. That's definitely where our focus is at. So if you enjoy the things that you see on social media, or if you like this podcast, or if you're enjoying the YouTube or whatever, connection you have to spending time with us, and you want to dig deeper into that and spend more time with us and get even more value from our time together, the Patreon is certainly the place to do that. So quick shout out to our newest members since the last episode. We have got Grizzly Mike, Vivian Marinos, and then the last three here are first names only. We got Angie, Cindy, and Vicky. Welcome so much to the community, folks. We really appreciate having you here. Like we mentioned, there's a ton of perks to being a part of our Patreon community, but also your support through the Patreon is what allows us to do so many of the things we do at Small House Farm, including the podcast. So if you like the podcast, you'll love the Patreon. You can find a link to that and so much more, of course, down in the show notes, or you can go directly to patreon.com/smallhousefarm.
Let's talk flowers, the flowers of summer. So I want Bevan to explain where flowers are at in a plant's life cycle and a little bit more about the reproduction of a plant.
Sure. It's an interesting thing to think about the flowers. Oftentimes when I do like seed saving demonstrations or anything like that, we're talking about fruits and vegetables. And inevitably one of the questions is going to be, well, what about saving seeds from flowers? And I thought, oh, well, fruits and vegetables obviously all come from flowers, but we're not observing that part of the life cycle necessarily, or we're not aware of that part of the life cycle. So flowers, it falls into a magical part of the plant's life cycle. And sometimes maybe it's a little bit overlooked, even in its own way, as the role that the flowers are playing out there. We're not overlooking the flowers. They're gorgeous, but the role that they play in the reproductive cycle. We'll often talk about gardening and growing plants, starting them from seed, maintaining the plant, or harvesting the fruits and preserving them, or saving those seeds or whatever. And that flower kind of straddles that middle. That's right there. If it wasn't for the flower, we wouldn't have any of the fruits. We wouldn't have any of those seeds. The flower is what attracts the pollinators into the environment to then cause pollination to happen to get the fruits to occur. It's the most critical part of the reproductive cycle. It is, to say specifically, the sex organs of the plant. This is where reproduction happens, is inside of the flower.
And some flowers are perfect and some flowers are not. So tell us what that means.
Well, let's back that up. I will first say all flowers are perfect in their own way. But botanically speaking, only some flowers are perfect. That's the word that we're going to use to describe a flower that has both the male and the female parts inside of that flower. Or we could use different, lingo here. We could say the staminate and pistillate. We could say the pollen shedding and pollen receptive parts of the flower. They're all contained within one flower as a unit. It does all of its sexual reproduction in and of itself independently.
Can you give me an example of some flowers that are perfect?
Sure. Some of our favorites. So we could say tomatoes and peppers and eggplants and beans and all those guys. Those are perfect flowers. They're completely self-contained. They need no outside inputs at all in order to create the fruits that we desire.
What about how does the pollinators then affect that perfect flower?
They rarely do. As a matter of fact, they don't require pollinators in any way whatsoever in order to set fruit. Sometimes pollinators do get involved. It's hard to resist these beautiful flowers. Think about like an eggplant flower. Gorgeous, right? And you just want to get all up in it. Most certainly, the flower does not need you to get all up in it, but you certainly can. And that's how cross-pollination might happen between different varieties. But the flower itself in a perfect flower does not require any insects at all, or wind or anything necessarily to get that pollination to occur, to get that fruit to grow.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so then what does it mean if it's not perfect?
Okay, so then we're going to find ourselves in a couple of different categories. So we're going to have separate male and female flowers, right? Separate staminate and pistillate, separate pollen shedding and pollen receptive flowers.
And is that all within one plant, or are we talking separate?
It can be both. So sometimes we're going to have plants that will have male and female flowers all on the same plant, separate male and separate female flowers on the same plant. Great example here would be squash, right? All of our squashes, melons, cucumbers, those sorts of guys, they have separate male and female flowers that all grow on the same plant. But then sometimes we'll have plants that'll have the plant itself will only produce male flowers and the plant itself will only produce female flowers, right? They're separate. A good example here would be spinach. And so then you need a good population of these plants to ensure that you have a good ratio of male to females to ensure pollination is going to happen. And it's usually insects, sometimes wind. So you have to have a good amount of plants just to ensure there's enough pollen to get around to all the ladies out there that want it.
Wow, that's pretty cool. It's a really intricate system.
Yeah, it is really cool. And I think that one of the best parts of this for me is that opportunity to observe. I've always been, anybody's listening to me talk at all about plants, I talk a lot about walk around and look at your plants and observe what's going on out there. And taking the time to walk around and observe the flowers and the flower structures, I think that it's valuable. Just to understand that and learn that. But it's magical in a way. You get down inside of one of these flowers and you see all the little intricate parts and all the things that are moving and happening. It's pretty cool, right? And then sometimes we can get involved. If we're doing seed preservation work and we're trying to avoid cross-pollination between varieties, if we're trying to encourage pollination, if we don't have enough insects or whatever, sometimes we're going to hand pollinate. Sometimes we're going to bag blossoms to avoid cross-pollination. I mean, sometimes there's that interaction that we're going to have with these plants in the garden, and we have to understand what's happening before we start interacting, right? So learning about how these processes work, it's very, very important, but it's also it's just exciting and fun to, kind of get out there and be the bee sometimes and help move that pollen around. It's cool to be participating at that level. We were just recently at Phoenix Farm, which is a big community garden near us, and we were taking pictures of their flowers. And for part of this project, we keep referencing, and we were really deep into the squash patch there. And so for part of the photos, we were taking apart flowers, taking the petals off of them so you could get to the sexual part, so you could see the anther, which is the staminate portion. This is the pollen shedding portion. So you could see that little anther. It looks like a little mushroom or something. Or we could take apart, you could see the pistil. You could see where the pollen is received. It's neat to see, especially on a squash, because the size of the flowers is so large. It's really easy to identify all of the different parts. And what you come to realize when you're out there observing is that there are significantly more male flowers than there are female flowers, right? And this is for a couple of reasons. I mean, one, a lot of male flowers means a lot of pollen, which increases our odds of pollination being able to happen. The plant itself can only support so many fruits. So it's only going to have a few female flowers because it can only support a few fruits growing. You know what I mean? So you have less females, a lot more males. So you've increased your odds, but you've not overextended yourself by trying to grow too many fruits, right? So it's a very, very smart system. Female flowers don't even start to appear on the plant until there's an abundance of male flowers. Right? The plants aren't even going to waste their energy trying to do that until everybody's ready to move forward in the reproductive cycle. But the bonus here is at that first wave of male flowers, before there's any female flowers out there, you might say, oh, well, these flowers are pointless. But they're not. They're doing a couple of things. One, they're encouraging the pollinators. They're saying, hey, buddies, something cool's about to happen here. You better get involved. But two, for those of us that are interested in snacking out in the garden, we can start collecting those male flowers. They're delicious. And we can stuff them with cheese. We can do all sorts of wonderful things with them, right? So all of a sudden, what we don't even consider to be a food product in the garden actually is a food product in the garden. It's not just leaves and veggies. It's not just fruits. There's lots of flowers out there that we can eat too.
Well, don't get too carried away because we have actually a whole segment about eating flowers coming up later. But let's, now that we understand about pollination and where flowers fit within this life cycle, let's dive into some specific flowers. Bevan's latest book, Herbs in Every Season, half of the plants in the summer section are flowers. Obviously, you can use more than just the flowers of these plants, but we picked a couple of our favorites and we're kind of going to dive a little deeper into them. The first one being chamomile, which is actually the herb of the year, the International Herb Association's herb of the year. If you're not familiar with this, it's a really cool thing. They pick an herb every year, I think since like 1995 or maybe early 90s, and they've picked an herb and they make a book about it and they do some education about it. It's really cool. This 2025 herb is chamomile.
That's right. And chamomile is obviously one of our favorites as gardeners and herbalists. Chamomile is going to come across our life a lot. That's a plant that we're going to use quite often. It's probably most well known for its calming effect. Chamomile is great for stress and anxiety. A nice chamomile tea is good. But we can also utilize the same chamomile flower infusion topically. It's soft and it's gentle, so it's great for skin irritations, itchy, red, rashy skin. It's a really nice skincare product. And that's maybe not as common of a use, but it's just as beneficial.
We actually use chamomile flowers in an infusion for a lotion that we make. So sun lotion is kind of what we call it. It's made with sunflower oil and an infusion with the chamomile and water. So I make a tea and then I use that tea as my water for the lotion. Kind of cool. But you could also either make the tea and put that water on your skin topically, or you could then you could infuse the chamomile in an oil and make a salve out of it that way, or a lotion or other sort of balm from the oil.
Yeah, I see a note here about chamomile, kombucha, or beer.
Yeah, you mentioned it in the book, and I thought it was really interesting. If you've ever made kombucha, you know that there's multiple different ferments, but that second ferment could be flavored with kombucha. Or I think actually, as you reference it in the book, you're talking about replacing, instead of using green or black tea in your kombucha, using chamomile to make your base.
Sure. And I mean, it's kind of a thing that I like to do with recipes. I even kind of referenced it with that curry that we talked about earlier, was like, let's take a traditional recipe everybody's familiar with and just mix it up by taking out this plant and putting a different plant in there and seeing what happens. And chamomile makes a really nice option there. It's got a flavor profile that really lends itself well to that type of a brew. I always find chamomile to be like a blend of like apples and honey.
Yes,
Whoa,
sweet
delicious.
And yummy smelling. Tasting.
Absolutely. Another fun thing I did in the book was we did an apple chamomile bread. So we did like a quick bread, like you do like maybe a zucchini bread or something, but with apples. But we infused the chamomile into that. And, throughout Herbs in Every Season, we explore these different ways to extract flavor or medicinal benefit or whatever it might be, outside of just maybe the traditional tea, but infusing the flowers in oil and then using the oil in the bread recipe, or infusing the flowers in fats like butters and milks and that sort of thing, and then incorporating it that way, because there's just so many different ways that we can help infuse these herbs into our recipes that we may not think about. But again, it's just looking at it from a different point of view. And then there's this world of flavor that's available to us.
So actually in that recipe, he's talking about this apple chamomile bread, which is in our Patreon. So if you're a part of the paid memberships, you can access this, or you can obviously find the recipe in Herbs in Every Season. But we take the chamomile, infuse it in milk in a very abnormal way to think about that. But like you said, really cool way. I mean, gosh, have you thought about infusing a recipe that calls for milk? Infusing your milk with something? Cool. That's super cool.
So in the chamomile section of Herbs in Every Season, if you have the book, it's on page 84. There's a little quote that I thought really this is exactly what we're trying to say here. Part of the fun of working with herbs in the kitchen is experimentation. And sometimes the wildest experiments yield the most flavorful results.
Definitely. So think outside the box, like he's saying, and how can I incorporate these plants into a recipe that I make all the time?
Another plant that's in the book that's a flower that we love and that everybody knows and loves, and by any other name will certainly smell as sweet, of course, is the rose.
The rose. And there are hundreds of species of roses. It's almost unbelievable.
I love to go to a rose garden. Here in Midland, we've got Dow Gardens, and they have a big rose garden there. And I just love to walk through it to see all the diversity. You know what I mean? The shapes and the colors and the aromas, and even the way that the plants grow is different. It's so much fun to see all of the differences here. But even though there's so many different roses, they're all useful, and we can use many of them in the same way. And it's a fun plant because it's like, it lures you in with its beauty and aroma, but if you get too close, thorns.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to be very observant about even harvesting it or being near it. So it's kind of a cool plant.
Right. I mean, so that being said, I wouldn't harvest any roses from the Dow Gardens. You know what I mean? They're using a lot of sprays and all these sorts of things there.
And I think, isn't that a common thing with roses, is that people have to spray them?
It is.
For what reason?
Insects, I think insect damage, maybe diseases, sometimes I think some roses that have been bred for their beauty sometimes are a little weak.
Yeah.
So then they need a lot of care to keep them going. But if you could find roses that aren't getting sprayed, that's really nice. Wild roses are a nice option, you know what I mean? Because, they're hardy as all get out. They're not going anywhere, and they're definitely not getting sprayed.
We actually, in the rose section of the book, also used a different way of infusing in butter in this rose buttercream frosting recipe. So just another example. If you have the book, look that up. It's a really cool, unique way to get that flavor by infusing in butter.
It's an incredible way to do it. Working on the recipes in the book was so much fun for me because it helped me experiment by taking a recipe that I was interested in at the time. So a buttercream frosting. The kids were really into this baking show at the time. So buttercream frosting was a thing happening in my life. And I thought, well, what can we do to put some plants in it, And I thought, well, infusing these rose petals in butter and then using the butter and the buttercream, that sounds outlandish. So we gave it a try, and then it turns out to be fantastic, and it was just a cool way to elevate your buttercream in a way and incorporate some of these wonderful herbs into the kitchen in a new way.
All right, let's move on to one of our favorite flowers of summer. It's a native plant that grows all over abundantly by us.
Yes, abundantly would almost be an understatement in some places. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium. I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's a biennial plant. The first year it makes its rosette of beautiful feather-like leaves, and then that second year puts up that awesome flower. Beautiful white flower is what the wild yarrow looks like for sure. This is a plant that's going to check all the boxes for us, right? It's gorgeous. The pollinators like it. It's medicinal. It's perennial. It's a native plant. It's really going to do a lot of that work, that heavy lifting for us out there. And it is one of our favorites. I love to talk about it. I love to use it for so many different things. We've been using yarrow in one of our salves. It's one of our earliest, longest lasting small house products, the healing salve that we make that's got the yarrow in it. So, it's a plant that we've had all this time with to develop this relationship and really get to know. It's antimicrobial, it's antiseptic, it's a styptic. And this is one of the most interesting things about this plant. A styptic is an herb, so it can help stop bleeding, right? So we could take a yarrow leaf and chew it up in this most simple form, but we get outside in nature and we have a big cut or something. Or a little cut, I suppose, any cut. Chew up this leaf and you can put this yarrow leaf across this cut and it'll stick right to it and it'll actually help stop the bleeding. It's like nature's Band-Aid in a way. And being an antiseptic and antimicrobial, it's going to help keep that wound clean. I think this is such a valuable plant for people to know, especially if you were in the wild and there was an accident or something happened and you needed some first aid. To be able to use this yarrow to slow down the bleeding, to stop the bleeding, to keep the wound clean until you're able to get to medical help if you need it. I mean, it could be a life-saving bit of knowledge, So this is a plant that I just recommend everybody get to know.
And it's easy to identify by the 1,000, the 1,000 leaves?
Millefolium. 1,000 blades of grass. Yeah, and so the leaf looks like a beautiful feather. It's peppery, it's bitter, it's astringent, but that's to say it's not completely edible. We made a yarrow leaf salt, which worked out really, really nice. The salt works as a preservative, and that peppery bitteriness of the yarrow really translates well into then becoming the salt that you can use on meat. A really nice flavor to it. But just eating a handful of the leaves, not delicious.
And right around the same time that yarrow is blooming, there's a couple other white umbelled plants that could be blooming nearby as well. But yarrow makes it really easy to tell the difference between these plants because of that 1,000 leaves and the way that it looks like a feather. So it's easy to identify. But Queen's Anlace is similar if you weren't, familiar. And then
water hemlock and stuff. I mean, so there are a few that are similar, vaguely similar. So if you have no knowledge of these plants at all, it's possible that it would have a difficulty with that. So make sure you take the time to properly identify any of these plants, right? Before you even pick them, get to know them, understand what they look like, you know what I mean? And once just the slightest observations, you'll be able to notice right away the differences in these plants and be able to identify them. But yeah, proper identification for any wild plants, obviously very important.
And so you'll find them in the wild easily, but you can also find yarrow at greenhouses and, local greenery places, whatever, Lowe's or Home Depot places. You can easily find them. Now, a lot of times they're not white yarrow, they're other colored yarrow. How does that happen?
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, they've just bred these plants for all these different colors. You know what I mean? There's pinks and yellows and all sorts of different stuff, and they're very beautiful, Now, it's often said that these cultivars that have been developed for these colors may not be as medicinally potent as the wild yarrow. And that's likely to be true. I mean, when we breed plants for one trait, we tend to lose other traits. So that would make sense. But in a pinch, especially from a first aid point of view, if all of you have access to is colored yarrow, absolutely use it. It's going to get the job done, and then you can get yourself to some assistance anyways. But these beautiful colored yarrows, they're going to do some of the other things for us as well. They're still popular with pollinators still and that sort of thing. So bringing them into the garden, is a beautiful addition. Most certainly. And some people like those different pops of color. And
actually what's really cool about yarrow is that it dries really well. Like you almost can't even tell that it's dry because it keeps its formation, it keeps its color. They're great as like a dried bouquet to get you through the winter and kind of give you that pop throughout your house. So,
oh yeah, that's a cool idea.
Yeah. And when you dry them and then a lot of times we just leave them whole, on their stem and everything and stuff them in a bag, and you'll take them out later and they literally look, it's amazing. And actually, yeah, we wanted to mention a little bit about how to dry yarrow or any plant by any means, but yarrow is an easy one. I mean, you can cut it at the stem, tie it into little bundles like we've referenced in other podcast episodes, and hang it up and let it dry that way. But you could also just lay it out on a screen and let it dry in front of a fan.
Absolutely. And it's just important to know that when you're drying herbs in bundles, that you make sure that the bundles are small enough that all those parts of the plant are going to get good airflow, because if you get like a big bundle of leaves all pushed together, there's no airflow, it's going to go bad. So that makes yarrow a great option for bundling because the leaves are so spaced out. There's a lot of open space in that plant. So they do make a nice bundle so they're not too congested, most certainly. But that's an important thing to always consider. When you're drying your herbs, always think about airflow. You need good airflow around these plants, whether it's on a screen or in a bundle or in a dehydrator, whatever it is. You got to have that airflow, and you want to dry these herbs down as quickly as you can so they maintain those colors and those vibrant flavors and all that good stuff.
So there's so many flowers in summer, and so these were just a couple ones that we picked. But what's your favorite flowers? Tell us leave us a comment or send us an email and tell us what kind of flowers you're harvesting right now.
Yeah, I would love to hear about it because, we can only talk about so many things on the show.
But what we also really wanted to dive a little bit into was eating flowers. There's a bunch of really cool flowers that you can actually just eat.
I love the edible flowers. And so for me, looking at these plants from again, that different perspective where we may not even be thinking about the flowers as a food source is really, really cool. The squash flower that we talked about, of course, being a really good example. Some other flowers that I love to eat would include things like redbud, which is a little out of season at this point, but worth mentioning because I love them so much. In that same vein, of course, then would be viola, violets and that sort of thing in the early spring. They're sweet, delicious little treats. Nasturtiums, of course, that's probably a pretty popular one. Rose, we've mentioned. Borage, we didn't mention borage, but oh my gosh, delicious and cool looking flowers. I was actually at a place one time, a little high-end type of restaurant, and they put borage flowers inside of ice cubes and then served those. They were in like the cocktails and stuff, these little borage flower ice cubes. Striking and stunning. And then at the end, you got a little tasty flower to eat. I think they kind of taste like cucumbers.
The cucumbers, that's what I was going to say, is that if you've never tried one, and if you have a borage plant growing in your yard or you run across one, literally pick it right off the plant and put it in your mouth. And it feels kind of funny at first. You're like, I'm going to put this flower in my mouth like this. So good. And actually, same thing applies with the nasturtiums. I feel like if you're not used to just picking a flower off the plant and stuff it in your mouth, it feels funny, but oh my gosh, so cool. And nasturtiums are like peppery and bitter and like they have such a zing to them. They're really good.
I'd read a recipe one time in Italy. They take the borage plant, which is kind of hairy. And if you ever touched one, it's kind of pokey. But they cook it down and they mix it with ricotta cheese and use it as a stuffing in ravioli. And ever since I've read that, I've been thinking about doing it. I haven't had the chance to do it, but I'm like, I want to so bad. But anyways, we're talking about the flowers. So some more popular flowers to eat, of course, chives.
You can actually just eat those whole flowers.
You can eat the flowers. You can put them in salads, or you can put them in vinegar, infuse them in vinegar and make a nice chive vinegar. You could turn it into a salad dressing or something like that. It's really nice. Elder flowers, of course, are delicious. Brassica flowers, this is a fun one. I just think, another example of a part of a plant we may not be thinking about eating. And when I say brassica flowers, I'm talking like your broccoli. The broccoli itself is brassica flower buds. That's what broccoli is, right? So that is a big flower bud cluster that we're eating. But any of these brassica plants, so the mustards and kale and all these sorts of things, when they go to flower and they put up these beautiful yellow flowers, those flowers are delicious and they're edible. And if some of them, the stalks, even the stems, if you harvest them right away, are still tender and stuff, so you can use them. But I've been collecting mustard flowers. We have a couple different varieties of mustard that are all trying to flower at the same time. And I'm not allowing that to happen because I'm trying to avoid cross-pollination. So it's a chore that I have to do anyways, is to cut some of these flowers back to stop that from happening. So I'm cutting these flower stalks, and then I can just strip these flowers right off of those stems, and I can put them in my eggs. I can put them on salads. I can put them anywhere I want, and they're spicy and they're fun and they're beautiful. And it's a food that my plant is providing me while it's providing me the other food that I'm intentionally growing. So it's like bonus food for sure. One that I really got excited about the other day was snapdragons. Snapdragons, growing up, I always love the snapdragons because you squeeze them and they open and they look like a little dragon mouth or whatever. Never realizing that these were edible. Not only are they edible, but you can like brew them into tea. And you can do all sorts of fun stuff. So we got our buddy Ryan from Baker Creek Heirloom Seeds. You're probably very familiar with Ryan if you ever have seen Baker Creek online. If you follow him on Instagram or something, you know exactly who Ryan is. He thought maybe he'd share a little time with us, telling us all about the wonders of the snapdragons in his Snappy Patch.
Hey, y'all caught me having tea time with my snapdragons. Woo! I love the Snappy Patch. These big, beautiful, magical puffies are just perfect in vases on the table for your tea time. These little beauties aren't just for looking pretty. Squeeze the sides and they've got bite. That Snapdragon tea is super powerful. I wonder if I'll get me some Super Dragon power. I just love my super fine Snapdragon tea time. Just fills my mind with a super pleasant rhyme. Pristine, lean, and mean. With no caffeine, it's made me a tea fiend.
And boy, does he say it well. He is fun and entertaining and inspiring. And actually, we're growing these snapdragons in our yard specifically after seeing this super fun video. And I'm excited to try them and photograph them and observe them more closely.
Absolutely. You know, he does have a way of making the garden extra fun.
Oh, did you know that huggers live longer? Be sure to give your rare crops a hug today.
There are so many wonderful ways that we can enjoy these plants. And even after years and years of growing and using herbs and flowers, I still find new and exciting ways to enjoy these plants every single season. The more curious we can be, the more we're going to enjoy what's happening in our gardens. So if we can really embrace the beauty and the novelty of what's happening out there, that's just going to make the whole experience that much better.
Well, happy summer. Enjoy it. It's going fast.
Here we are at the end of yet another show. Big thanks to Ryan Shoemaker from Baker Creek for joining us today, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. Remember, if you enjoy the podcast and would like to show your support, you can always join our community on Patreon. You can find that link and so much more at seedsandweedspodcast.com. This episode was edited and produced by all of us here at Small House Farm, and the music we're enjoying right now is a fun, funky beat from Original Soundtrack. Thanks again for joining us, friends. We'll see you next time.